The recount of ballots following Guyana's March 2nd general elections have been met with strong complaints. Jamaica welcomes nearly 120 repatriated citizens who were stranded abroad due to restrictions amid the COVID-19 pandemic. And at least 13 people have been killed and hundreds hospitalized after a gas leak at a chemical plant in India. Welcome to Telesur, I'm Carla Gonzalez and this is from the South. The recount of ballots following Guyana's March 2nd general elections have been met with strong complaints. The ruling Partnership for National Unity criticized the PPPC for not providing the keys for ballot boxes, which had to be pried open. This while the main opposition, People's Progressive Party, Civic, raised concerns that counting for the highly contested Region 4 had stopped at 5 p.m., 2 hours before the process was scheduled to conclude. A complaint was lodged to the Elections Commission CEO.
At 5:15 today, this afternoon, one of the stations closed off because the APNU AFC counting agent said that she has to go. We cannot have situations like those. The working day is defined by the timeline. We could have at least completed one more box at that station today.
Meanwhile, on Thursday, the ruling Partnership for National Unity announced that GCOM was forced to temporarily stop the running of the tabulation process at the recount center. It claimed this occurred after a meeting was busted between the opposition and GCOM's information technology supervisor. Last month, GCOM agreed to a recount at 10 workstations over the course of 25 days, which began this Wednesday. Jamaica has facilitated the repatriation of 119 citizens who were stranded abroad due to restrictions amid the pandemic. 75 crew members from across 6 ships and 40 Jamaicans stranded in the UK returned home on Wednesday. They will be placed in quarantine for 14 days. Prime Minister Andrew Holness announced that due to the hardship experience, the government will cover the cost of the quarantine arrangements. The Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Dr. Ralph Gonsalves, says COVID-19 has not yet altered his plans to host elections at the end of the year. General elections are due by March 2021, but Gonsalves said citizens will vote ahead of the 3-month grace period. He said it's too soon to state if this will change, but he has moved ahead with drafting a letter to the Governor General regarding the appointment of the Elections and Boundaries Commission, after discussions with the opposition leader. Now to Honduras, where hundreds of taxi drivers have blocked a busy boulevard in Tegucigalpa, demanding that the government provide financial aid amid the pandemic. Some 600 drivers parked their taxis on a street in the west side of the capital. The demonstration went on until public officials delivered bags of food to protesters. While they welcomed the aid, they say they also need financial support to pay for basic services like electricity or water. The government imposed a nationwide curfew that prohibits any type of transport except vehicles delivering food supplies.
Every 8 days they receive their food, which is not the solution. There must be another way to avoid putting them in danger, because here we are in danger.
We asked for 2,000 lempiras, which is around $80, a monthly financial aid from the government, but I doubt they will give it because this government is greedy.
Belize has revised its state of emergency, reducing some of its measures imposed to combat the pandemic for 60 days. Some businesses are allowed to reopen, but social distancing rules and the mandatory wearing of face masks still apply. This as the Prime Minister warned that penalties are being increased for breaches of some of the measures.
That ultimately everything depends on our observing the physical distancing and other rules. Thus it is that we are actually increasing the penalties for particular breaches. As just one example, those caught using the illegal crossings to go especially into Mexico and Quintana Roo, where the proliferation of coronavirus cases has skyrocketed, will, upon conviction, go straight to jail for 3 months. A second conviction will result in a 1-year prison sentence.
And now we'll look at Belize's response to the pandemic. We have Dr. Marvin Manzanero. He's the Director of Health Services and the Ministry of Health of Belize. Let's see if we can have him. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Manzanero.
Yes, good morning. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you for joining us. So how would you describe Belize's handling of this pandemic, especially now there's no cases of COVID-19 in the past 17 days?
Yeah, well, we're going on to our 4th week now since we had our last case. Our last case was actually confirmed on April 13th, which means that by this coming Monday, we would have done 28 days without a confirmed case. That being from when we had our first case on the 23rd of March. So I believe we have done fairly well. And that in part has to do with the measures Belize has taken in terms of lockdown, state of emergency, bringing us to where we are now.
And you were mentioning the lockdown. How does that affect citizens? For example, having all these measures, country borders being closed, how is that affecting citizens?
Well, you know, we never did have a community transmission happening in Belize, but we took measures as if we were having extensive community transmission almost from the get-go. I know it's a difficult situation because people are not routinely used to this. It's a drastic public health measure to the point that even Belizeans who were caught outside of Belize were banned from coming back in. I don't know that we had resistance from the community as such. Even though our land borders, for example, right now remain closed. Our borders with Guatemala are closed, borders with Mexico are closed, the airport is still closed, and that's been for more than a month now. I don't know that the community has been providing any kind of resistance to those measures. I think we're trying to adapt to the new norms and understanding that new norms such as physical distancing, as you mentioned, the use of masks now in public, those are new norms that we are gradually educating the general public about.
So can you explain what are those new norms, or at least those restrictions that are being eased for now?
Yeah, we developed a scaled up approach when we started first initially the banning of certain citizens from coming to Belize, eventually closing the airport, eventually closing one border and then the other border. So we're using that same approach when we scaled up till we got to a complete lockdown, scaling it down. We definitely are not considering opening the borders for now. Mexico is having their ongoing increasing pandemic, a number of cases. Same thing in Guatemala. US and Honduras, which are the other neighbors close to us. So it's going to be a phased out approach. Schools have still been closed. They were closed 2 weeks before the Easter break. That's the 3rd week in March. And we may very well lose the school year, but those are mechanisms that we felt needed to be done in order to be able to contain this first wave of COVID-19.
And is the government thinking about a possibility of our second spike of contagions, of people getting infected with COVID-19? And is the country ready to handle that type of crisis if it were to happen?
Well, as we had said initially when we got our first wave, it's not a question of if, but when. It's the same thing that becomes applicable to us. We anticipate we will have another wave, yes, which can be potentially much more, have more number of cases, more morbidity, more mortality than the first wave, if we are not careful, if we let our guard down. The opportunity I think we have had with Belize in the first wave is we have had ample time to prepare. We are learning from what other countries are doing. We are looking at what our neighbors are doing. So we should be better prepared as a Ministry of Health, as a community, and as a government to be able to handle any other second wave. Of course, in COVID-19, there are so many things that are unpredictable, but I think if we hinge our response like we did this time around in good classic public health measures, we should be able to contain a second wave when it eventually arrives.
And Belize, like many other Caribbean nations or Central American, at least in the area, have received international support, solidarity from other countries, especially medicals and doctors from Cuba. How was that work has been handled in Belize? Was that enough? Did you manage to work together with them to assure the population that there are ways to prevent the virus from spreading?
Yeah, Belize has had a Cuban brigade presence from the years ago, from the late 90s. And so whenever we started having this potential increase coming up, we did alert government measures were started. And then we got an initial brigade number of close to 60 that included specialists, medical doctors, nurses, lab personnel, and maintenance of equipment personnel. They are still in country. We anticipate that they will be here for the next couple of months, depending on how it goes. For the time being, it seems we have contained this first wave, but I think the close relationship there is with the government of Cuba would allow us to tap into that resource should that be required.
Indeed. Thank you very much, Dr. Manzanero, for your time and for explaining us how the new normal will be now for Belize. Thank you.
Thank you.
We were talking to Dr. Marvin Manzanero from Belize on the situation of the COVID-19 pandemic in that country. We'll take a short break now, but don't go away. Welcome back. More news at this hour. Venezuela's President Nicolás Maduro has presented new evidence against U.S. mercenaries who allegedly tried to topple his government.
There have been testimonies, top testimonies, speaking of the involvement of this individual, this American citizen, a former Green Beret, Jordan Woodrow. He is president and CEO of a security company, Silver Corp, based in Florida. Whoever wants to search for the elements, you will be able to easily get them in the United States. Jordan Woodrow has worked directly with Donald Trump for many years. He has rendered security services, intelligence services.
President Maduro presented part of the interrogation in which a U.S. mercenary, Luke Alexander Denman, confirmed the participation of Venezuelan opposition lawmaker Juan Guaido in the failed terrorist plot.
Did you know about a document that described the close of the operation?
Yes, I saw it about a month and a half ago with Jordan's signature and Juan Guaido's signature.
The mercenary confirmed that the goal of the operation was to kidnap President Nicolás Maduro and take him to the United States.
Tasks involve taking control of the airport,
securing the sector, establishing outer security, communicating with the tower, bringing in planes, one of which includes one to put Maduro on and take him back to the United States.
Fishermen in Chuao, a small coastal town in Aragua State, Venezuela, were part of the operation that detained 8 mercenaries trying to lead an incursion into the country. The so-called Operation Gideon sought to carry out terrorist attacks, including a possible assassination attempt against the president.
This is the coast of Chuao, a fishing town well known for its cocoa plantations. It can only be reached by sea or air. Security forces are still in the area after a group of fishermen on Sunday detected an unknown boat carrying 8 mercenaries following a joint operation between civilians and the military and the police. The mercenaries were captured on this beach.
We were fishing as we do most days. When we saw a speedboat we didn't recognize. After we reported, this helicopter from the armed forces arrived over the area, accompanied by the Navy contingent. They never thought a fisherman could also be part of the militia. Farm workers are part of the militia. So are teachers, policemen, We are all part of the Bolivarian militia. As a people, we are always at the ready.
Vamos a darle un aplauso al mundo desde Chuao, que Venezuela se respeta.
Another thing these mercenaries couldn't imagine was that they would be captured by a Chavista community that was already on the alert following intelligence about a possible incursion.
They underestimated us, thinking less of us. They didn't see us coming as an organized people. They think they are John Rambo and we are simple workers, but we will always triumph.
Es el tejido social que se ha construido en más de 20 años.
This is the social fabric that has been woven over more than 20 years of the Bolivarian Revolution. Once more, David met Goliath in what was proven to be an attempt at an invasion backed by the United States.
Y 8 de sus mercenarios fueron detenidos.
They came face to face with us and our simple weapons, our rifles and small pistols that did not compare to theirs. As we were getting ready to apprehend them, we saw some of them were trying to reach their weapons to fire at us. That's when the fishermen helped us restrain them with their fishing lines. When one of them said he was the son of Baduel, we knew these were the terrorists we had been warned about. We had their pictures already and were on alert. When they got off the boat, we came to support the police officers because there were few of them.
As they were being apprehended and before backup arrived, the mercenaries asked to be freed.
They told us to join their cause, saying this government was going to be toppled. They said there were more of them and they were doing this for us. They said we were the same, we belong to the same country, and they told us they had dollars. No matter how much money they offer, we will always maintain our dignity.
Peace was interrupted for a moment in Chuao and its people came out to defend it.
With violence, you cannot win. This is a united nation. They weren't just coming to kill the president. If that had happened, this would have become a slaughterhouse, and we can't allow that. This town is paradise. We know how to fish, how to work. We have people who work in the cacao plantation and others who fish. We are not used to violence. This is not how you get rid of a government. If you want Maduro out, you need to take part in the electoral process. This is not the way.
Madeline García, Telesur, Chuao, Venezuela.
To other news now, Lesotho's Prime Minister Thomas Thabane has reiterated his intention to retire by the end of July, despite risk of prosecution for his alleged involvement in the 2017 murder of his wife. His ruling All Basotho Convention Party last week rejected his demand for immunity from prosecution after he steps down.
Allow me to announce today that one significant step leading to my retirement has been complemented with the enactment of the 9th Amendment to the Constitution. As a result, government and the political party that I lead will coordinate the process of my retirement.
Malawi's two main opposition leaders have registered for a rerun of the elections that saw President Peter Mutharika controversially return to office. Malawi's top court in February overturned last year's vote and called for fresh polls, citing widespread irregularities. Both the President and the Electoral Commission have appealed against the election annulment, and it is the first time a presidential election has been challenged on legal grounds in Malawi since independence from Britain in 1964. 10 candidates are expected to run in the new election, which has been set for July 2nd. We have more stories coming up. Stay with us. Thank you for joining us again. At least 13 people have been killed and hundreds hospitalized after a gas leak at a chemical plant in eastern India. The gas escaped out of tanks at a complex owned by South Korea's LG Chem that had suspended operations because of India's coronavirus lockdown. Footage from local media showed people, including women and children, lying unconscious in the streets of Visakhapatnam. Authorities used mist blowers to spray water in the affected area to neutralize the effect of the gas.
Incident happened, as per report, at around 2:30 a.m. in the previous night. Initially, the people were affected in terms of throat irritation, skin irritation, and some toxic gas smell. So the local villagers tried to contact the local administration and the local police station, and the RRC unit immediately rushed and was there within half an hour. And after that, they helped in two ways. The first was for neutralizing the situation inside the polymers, LG polymer factory itself. And the second is for the evacuators near the factory site, which is the abutting village of Venkatapuram.
Dozens of Israelis protested outside the offices of the Prime Minister, anchored by a Supreme Court ruling that Benjamin Netanyahu may form a new government while under indictment for corruption charges. Some even chained themselves to the railing of metal barriers outside the office. The unanimous decision, released just before midnight on Wednesday, cleared the way for Netanyahu and his once rival Benny Gantz to join together in a controversial power-sharing deal. Netanyahu and Gantz said they expected their coalition to be sworn into office next week. Dozens of protesters in Lebanon have taken to the streets in the capital Beirut, demanding the release of those detained in last week's protests. Police tried to disperse demonstrators who gathered outside the military court in the capital. Earlier in the day, dozens gathered outside the Justice Palace to demand the independence of the judiciary and the release of detained protesters. Last week's demonstrations had been triggered by price hikes in consumer goods due to the crash of the local currency, which had lost more than half of its value. Thousands of people in Thailand have queued at the finance ministry in Bangkok to enroll in a 3-month cash handout of $450. Thai authorities have already approved 13.4 million people, half of the applicants for this program. This is expected to benefit a third of the population. Mainly informal workers who lost their jobs in tourism, entertainment, food and service sectors were present. In Russia, wildfires have continued to spread through fields in Siberia, with blazes spreading across nearly 460 square kilometers. Zabaikalsky Krai, the region hit the most by the fires, hasn't seen significant rainfalls for the last 3 months. Regional authorities have issued hundreds of fines to local residents and farmers for violating fire safety regulations. According to Greenpeace, the number of wildfires has increased by 20% since the start of the coronavirus lockdown, in part due to city dwellers escaping to the countryside. Iraq's parliament has chosen US-backed candidate Mustafa Kadhimi as prime minister, giving the country its first real government in months. The 53-year-old Kadhimi is Iraq's first real prime minister since the last one resigned and became a caretaker in November in the face of persistent anti-government protests. The parliament also approved 15 ministers out of a prospective 22-seat cabinet, with 7 ministries still empty. The new government is set to hold early elections, but Kadhimi admitted it would face an array of other challenges. These include navigating an economic crisis spurred by oil price crashes and the COVID-19 pandemic. And with that, we end our news brief, but you can find these and more stories on our website, telesurenglish.net. And be sure to follow health protocols where you are. For Telesur English, I'm Carla Gonzalez. Until next time.